Hello and welcome to Introduction to Epistemology, and today we are going to discuss knowledge and justified true belief. I have mentioned some important key indicators to understand knowledge and justified true belief. So what we have to understand that knowledge arises from experience, it emerges from reflection, it develops through inference, and it has a distinctive structure. How can we define experience, reflection, and inference? Let's discuss. When we talk about experience, it can be defined as practical contact with observation of fact or events. It could be defined as an event or occurrence which leaves an impression, or it could be explained in terms of the occurrence of an event or the event that occur. For example, the companies experience some difficulties, we can explain in that context. But when we talk about philosophical context, we're talking about person that learn from experience through observation and through facts, and we will discuss in detail later on. When we talk about reflection in philosophy, we're talking about if we're talking about someone else's reflection, we're talking maybe someone is happy or sad or have some certain sensations or emotional context of someone. So it could be defined as someone reflection, or it could be defined as self-reflection. So it's a general context. But in general, when we talk about in epistemology, according to the John Locke, we can say that epistemology, we're talking about reflection, like reflection are perceiving, thinking, doubting, believing, reasoning, knowing, and willing. We can explain according to the John Locke. We will discuss obviously in detail later on. And when we talk about inference, we're talking about the conclusion based upon the evidence and reasoning. The next question is whether we consider knowledge as justified belief. If you take a look of my heading, I mentioned knowledge is equal to justified belief. So actually both are same. So what is the meaning if someone have a false belief? Do we call it as knowledge? The answer is no. So in simple thing, I have mentioned in inverted commas that a false belief is not a knowledge. If a belief is based upon lucky guess, we cannot consider it as knowledge, even if it's true. So when we talk about knowledge, it is always being justified belief. And for Plato has mentioned belief would represent as a grade of cognition lower than the knowledge. So when we talk about grading, in terms of cognitive abilities, we're talking belief is low and knowledge is on the upper hand. But many philosophers call it as at least knowledge can make it as a belief. So if someone have true belief, if someone have justified true belief, we can call it as knowledge, but that's the least level of knowledge. And in this paragraph, if you read the last sentence, that if for example you can say that I still can't believe I lost, and we in these circumstances that we remove the truth from that knowledge, then that knowledge will be not as considered as knowledge, but it's just a belief. Which, for example, if someone believe that I will win, and in practical sense what happened that the person lost that game. So if we remove that truth, we found that okay, that is actually the person believe that he will win, but in reality the person does not win that match, and that information is only counted as belief, and it's a false belief, and the false belief is not counted as knowledge. Keep in mind with one thing, that when we use the word know, the word context always considered as certain. So if someone use the word like I know, it means that he is certain with something. So if for example someone said that okay, I know that I will win the match, then it means that he was certain that he will win the match. But what happened that if the person lose that match, then that the truth, if we remove that truth, it means that the person is actually having false belief and he does not win that match. So please keep in mind that the word no is always used in that context, that a person is certain with some claim that he tell, like, I win the match, I know that I win the match, so I know I'm telling the truth, I know that I am not lying. So it means that person is certain. So that is very important to understand this thing. And if in case that what has happened is in fact is opposite, it then obviously when we remove that context and when we remove that truth, then that person does not have actually knowledge on that thing, and then we call it as belief. So I already mentioned that in my previous slide as well, that knowledge is actually a least true belief, and we also call knowledge as justified true belief. And that is very important. I mentioned another thing, like people who certain feel something, like for example that is, if a friend is angry, but what happened that the person that feel that his friend is angry is in real sense he is not angry. So what happened that the person who believed that he is angry, he misunderstands something, and then what happened that his belief is false and he was not angry actually in real sense. So we have to understand that the statements are quite important what we speak. If someone say I know, then obviously that context is like that person is certain. If someone say that like I believe he is angry, so it means that he is not certain on his behavior, and what in real sense maybe the person is not angry. So you have to understand that if someone is believing on some action, some emotions, or some mental status, we cannot confirm that thing, and it is not appropriate to use such words, because then obviously in practical sense it is not possible, because when you say that someone believe that he is angry, it could be misleading, and it is entitled to his own opinion, and obviously that opinion could be false or could be misleading. And we will discuss these things in detail. Obviously this is only introductory lecture, so I'm just giving you a brief information or brief introduction, especially about knowledge is counted as a least true belief. Let's give you another beautiful example in next slide. And the question that I have highlighted, that does knowing something also imply justifiedly believing it? So for example, if someone, for example your friend, like I mentioned here as Jim, walking hurriedly to the field, to the grass field or to the hall, and believing that his friend is angry, and but he does not have any justification that why he is angry, we will never consider this as knowledge. But if in another scenario, like for example like Jim walking quickly to that hall, and Jim know when Jim see his friend, like John is shifting his papers, his body expression is quite angrily, his face is red, he was murmuring, or he was talking with himself with some curses. Like for example, if his behavior is like an angry, we have justification, like okay, he is red, his face expression is like look like an angry man, and then we have the justification that like John is angry. So there are two scenarios. If for example Jim going to someone or going to his place, to his friend place like John, and he don't know, but he know that his friend is angry, but he don't have any justification, we cannot consider it as knowledge. But if someone have justifications, like the characteristics of someone who is angry, like if you know your friends, that how your friends behave when they are talking to you, and when your friends are angry, some characteristics, because you spend a lot of time with your friends, and you can identify, okay, like for example my friend is quite get angry, like when he uses expressions like in the red, his face become red, or he may talking very quickly when he get angry. So that characteristics of that friend, so that's why you can justify that okay, your friend is angry because of these characteristics. and these characteristics are justifications, and then that is counted as knowledge. So without any justification we cannot consider any action, even if it true, as knowledge. Okay, I have given another context, especially if you see in inverted commas, like justified belief is an element of knowledge. I already mentioned that true justified belief is knowledge, but now we are talking another thing, that the justified belief is also element of knowledge, and giving you another example of like Jim. If you read this paragraph, I mentioned in the brief, like Jim briskly shuffling his paper, pass his office, but do not hear any for example curses. So it means that the characteristics are not clear, like for example his friend is not using any expressions, his face expression is normal, your friend is not using any curses. But what happened that a bit later I saw him walking hurriedly down to the hall, and given, because you think his temperament, you have the evidence, we have some evidence that okay, he is angry. So it means that if the characteristics are very few, for example I already mentioned in the previous slide that for example face expression, body language, his face become red, or some person that likes talking very quickly when the person get angry, there are a lot of characteristics and there are a lot of justifications that is given to someone, that or giving justification that person is angry. But if someone does not have sufficient evidence, instead only he saw one evidence that person is walking very quickly to the hall, then still the person have evidence but not enough evidence to believe that his friend is angry. So we call that information as a low grade knowledge, because the characteristics of that person is not complete, is not quite, the information or knowledge is not quite evident. So that's why we may be doubtful, and our evidence is not strong enough to justify that the person is angry, but we still count it as a knowledge or as an element of knowledge. But this view is quite plausible, and we can assume that knowledge, but that's least information that we get from someone. So we will discuss in detail with more examples later on in next topics. So thank you so much for today's lecture, and hope to see you again.